Hi guys. So I thought that it might be helpful for you to actually understand what we're talking about when we talk about correlations and direction and strength of correlations by using some data that's meaningful for you. So here we have the data that you provided in the Google Sheets when I asked you to describe our class. You gave us information about your age, your height, your gender, whether you were living with roommates or with your family, how many hours you spent studying for the midterm. And I also obviously know your midterm scores. So I've put all of that data together in SPSS, which is a program that allows us to do some more statistical analyses to ask whether, first of all, we have a correlation between, let's say, midterm scores and the number of hours you spent studying for the midterm, and what that relationship looks like. So here's the data here. Each row represents one student in the class. You can see we've got lots of students in our class. Each column represents a different variable. SPSS categorizes whether the variables are continuous, so ratio or interval scale, or if they're more discrete, whether they use the nominal or ordinal scale. Because it needs to know what kind of data it is before it can allow you to do different kinds of statistical analysis. So we couldn't do a correlation using gender, for example, because that's looking at different groups of participants. We can do correlations when both of our variables have this ruler and they're measured using more continuous data. So let's go ahead now and see if there's a relationship and a correlation between your midterm score, you're here somewhere, and the number of hours you guys spent studying for the midterm. So here we're going to, first of all, plot a scatter plot to see what the relationship looks like, and then we'll look to see if there is significant correlation. So we go graphs, we want to do scatter plot. And now we can tell SPSS what our variables are. So we want to look at midterm scores, and we want to look at hours studying for the midterm, and we hit OK. So I have to share a different screen so that you can see what the output looks like. So hold on for a second. And here we go. Okay, so hopefully this works, and hopefully you can see a graph here. And we've got midterm scores on this axis. We've got the hours spent studying for the midterm here. If we double click on it and click on here, SPSS does this nice thing for us and plots a line. So we can look and see what the relationship is. So you'll notice, first of all, that most people scored pretty high on the midterm, and most people studied for, you know, around 5, 6, 7 hours. You can also see from this line that there is some sort of relationship here. So this line is not like straight horizontal, it's moving up a little bit to the right. So this suggests that we've got some positive relationship. You might also notice from the dots here, they're not falling right on the line, so it's definitely not going to be a strong relationship. And here we've got our coefficient of determination that can actually tell us how much of the variance in the hours spent studying for the midterm tells us about what can be used to predict what people's midterm scores are. And so you can see that there's a small number here. Probably about, you know, like 2% of the variance can be accounted for that. Now let's go ahead and run a correlation and see if it's significant. So we want to do what's called a bivariate correlation, and we put our variables here. We want to look to see if this correlation is linear, so we do the Pearson correlation. We want to see whether it's significant. And so here is the results that we get. So midterm, we want to see if that relates to hours spent studying for the midterm. Here's our R value, the Pearson correlation value. It is 0.17. So this is a positive relationship, and it is pretty weak. 0.1 is not a big correlation. But here, if we look at the significance, we can see that the significance level, the p-value, is 0.029. It's less than 0.05, so this would be significant. In part because we've got a lot of participants. There's a lot of students in the class that's helping us get a significant result here. So the conclusion from the question, is there a relationship between the number of hours students spent studying for the midterm and what their midterm scores are? And what is that relationship? Well, we could say, yes, there is a relationship. It's a weak positive relationship. To some degree, people who study more for the midterm are more likely to score higher on the midterm than students who who studied less. Let's look at the relationship between two variables that probably won't show a correlation. Let's look and see if what the relationship is between midterm scores and how tall you are. So we would again do another scatter plot, and here we go. We're looking here at midterm, but now we can look at height. Stick that over there, click OK. Here's our scatter plot. If we double click on it, we'll get our line. And so here you can see that the line is going down. It's a negative correlation. It's pretty close to being horizontal, so it's definitely not going to be a strong correlation. Pretty close to zero. Those dots are not falling along the line really at all. That line is definitely not diagonal. So this is probably not a significant relationship. This correlation is probably around zero. We can see that it doesn't matter if you are short or if you're tall, there's going to be no relationship with your height and what your score is on the midterm. So for example, this person who's a little bit shorter scored really high, and this person who is taller also scored pretty high. So there's no consistent relationship between height and midterm score. And let's go ahead and look to see if that correlation really is not significant. And we'll put those two variables in here. So midterm and height, we want to see if there's a linear correlation. And here we go, here's our data. So here we can see it's a negative correlation. It's very weak, 0.1, very close to zero, and in fact, that's not significant. So the conclusion from the question of, is there a correlation between students' height and their midterm scores? The answer to this would be no. Hope this illustrates what we've been talking about in a little bit more detail. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.